Okay, okay. Let me do a test and make sure I'm coming through with the microphone. Good deal. All right. So I am very glad to see all of you here today. Looks like we have a decent crowd shows up between our Horeb in the Discord, but also on YouTube. So I have made, without a vow, I have made a promise, sort of a commitment to keep an eye on the chat in both. I am going to try to do that. So we thank you for your patience as I try to manage and juggle in both of those arenas. Today we're going to talk about the opening parsha, the opening Torah portion from the book of Exodus. That's what the class was about, and most of you were probably there. So I really want to hear from some of you. I want to hear from what are your thoughts, what are your comments. Quite a bit was packed into this class. I'm like you. Some of you have heard this before. Someone asked when this was originally broadcast. It was on Christmas Day, I believe, in 2021. So it's been a couple of years, but as I listened to, I had quite a few thoughts that I jotted down in my notes. All right, we have Dr. James Tabor. I'm going to bring him to the stage. Dr. Tabor, how are you today, my friend? Yeah, you're coming. Yes. They are. Sorry, but they are. Do I need to mute him here? No. I mean, look, they unconnected.
Just really being sharp. That's one comment. The other comment I had was, do you remember when Frank Moore Cross came out in Bar Magazine
I do.
and he said, I think Mount Sinai might be in Saudi Arabia. And he quoted Galatians, Paul, where Paul says Mount Sinai's in Arabia. And then the editor of BAR, Biblical Archaeology Review, Herschel Shanks, um, jumped in and did an article on it. You can look it up in the Bar Library. It's kind of interesting. And he says, well, that's really interesting. Maybe that has some weight. And this is long before even any of the evangelicals got into this, you know, the films that you mentioned and so forth.
Yeah.
And because I work on Paul, I sort of have a different perspective on that. Remember, Cross is a ancient Near Eastern scholar. He's not really a New Testament scholar.
Mm-hmm.
But in Greek, when you say when Paul wrote Galatians, probably in the 50s CE or AD, Arabia was a reference to the Arava in Hebrew. The
Yeah.
Arava, as you know, mentioned in Isaiah 40, verse 3. There's the midbar, the desert, and then there's the Arava. And you explained this before, but we have a lot of new people.
Right.
The Arava is a rift valley. It starts way up in Syria, basically the headwaters of the Jordan, and runs all the way down into Africa. And it literally, you know, we associate it more with the Dead Sea. But if you get a good Bible map, some of you have the Oxford maps, and trace it on further south, uh, that's really what the Arava is. So in the book of Kings, when Samuel's running down from Beersheba, remember, it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
We've suggested that he went down the Scorpion's Path, lands right in the Arava, the low Rift Valley. We've driven it many times. You're really up high in Beersheba, and then you start your winding, scary hairpin turns down into the Arava.
Right.
And you go down to the lowest spot on Earth. It's about 1,200 feet, 1,300 feet below sea level. And your ears even pop. Now you're in the Arava. And if you go on south on the main Highway 90 down to Eilat, you're in the Arava the whole time.
Yeah.
And as you get about, what, a third of the way down from that Beersheba Road or the Scorpion's Path, it's at Biblical Tamar, you will pass two of the sites for Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula that I've had the most interest in, and I think you have too. One is Har Karkum, that would be first.
Yeah.
And then there's the Simcha Jacobovici site, and other scholars, he's not the first one to suggest this, usually called,
Hashem
what is it,
Tarif
Hashem El
Al Tarif.
Harif, yeah,
Yeah.
is the way it comes out, almost like it's the name of God, which it doesn't really have to do with that. But those are in the Arava. And so in Paul, when Paul went away into Arabia, he says, he didn't make a trip to Saudi Arabia on the other side of the Red Sea. He's saying he had his Damascus experience. And he says, I went away into Arabia. He basically took a trip down south, down the Jordan Valley, all the way down to wherever it was. And let's say it was Har Karkum. So what's happening today, this is like mixing modern 19th century geography with ancient geography, because we have a country today called Saudi Arabia.
Right.
We think Arabia means Saudi Arabia. What it actually means is the country that's bordering the Arava, which is, we call it Saudi Arabia. So you could just as well call you could call Masada part of Arabia too, because it's in the Arava. The Qumran community's in the Arava, the community that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I think this chase for Saudi Arabia might, with the evangelicals at least, it might go back to Professor Cross just making this kind of offhanded remark, and then Herschel Shanks kind of jumping on it. But as you know, it's got quite a few other problems.
Yeah.
So,
And I see
yeah,
Dave Tyler's commenting also, Larry Williams about the theory about, and you have Ron Wyatt and some of these other guys too. But yeah, people pick that up and they just run with it. But a lot of people have not been in this region. The Tylers and I've been several times there, but you've done many, many, many times you've been in this region. It just doesn't make sense when you think that a group of, especially if we go with the numbers put forward in the Pentateuch, where you have 603,550 males, if that count is to be read that way, and then you add women and children, there's no way they navigated across the entirety of the Sinai Peninsula, crossed anywhere along the Gulf of Aqaba, and went into that region, which is, as you pointed out, only now called Saudi Arabia. They wouldn't have called it, anyway.
well, I wonder if we have available to post for people. I'm sure you have it somewhere. I have it, but I just have a printout in front of me. And it is the response. I think it was on Facebook.
Oh,
It's
yeah. Is
not.
that David Roll's response?
Yeah, David Rolls, when Tim Mahoney came out with Patterns of Evidence, Yeah, it was on, and it's really very moving. I think it'd be fine to post, and if you don't have it, I have it somewhere as a PDF. We saved it, and it's dated, let's see, February 20th, 2020. So it's right as COVID was starting, so it kind of got lost in the mix. But Roll is, this is Rohl. Roll is writing Tim personally, and he starts written in pain and sorrow. Just to
Yeah,
know, just for everybody to know, these are two, very learned people that have researched this. And what David's saying is, it hurts me to tell you this, but you've made a huge and serious mistake.
right.
And then so it's a kind message. And David really means that. Some of you know him, and some of us know him. I mean, I don't know how many of you know him, but a lot of us do. And he just literally goes through. And I mean, for me, it's just, he makes the case, so
Yeah,
people can go on and on about what's been found. And I have good friends that have been there. Dr. John Merritt, that who's dug with us at
right.
Mount Zion and so forth. He's been there 2 or 3 times. I saw him at a conference recently, and he's utterly convinced it's right. And he sees all the, this different signs that they show you when you go to that site in Saudi
Yeah,
Arabia. And but maybe we can, if you have that, Ross, you can
I
post
do.
it later. But I think
Yeah.
it'd be very helpful to people to read. And it's like clearing the air right away when you have
Hmm.
David Rolls say, "Look, this is really hard for me to tell you, Tim. You're my good dear friend, but
Right.
you've really made a big mistake here." So
Yeah.
anyway,
Now that's a good point. I can post that again. I saved it as a note on my phone and all my devices because it was such a well
right,
articulated
right,
rebuttal of that point by point. And there are a lot of things. Whenever I look at when we first started really working on this, where is Horeb, where is Sinai? You, if you follow the biblical clues, and like this Saudi Arabia thing, they have to move the desert of Shur. No one ever thought that the desert of Shur was anywhere other than the western side of what we now call the Sinai Peninsula. But in order for the
right.
sea crossing to be the Aqaba, the Gulf of Aqaba as we call it now, they have to move the desert of Shur all the way across the rift. And it really is untenable when you look at the details. So,
Yeah, and I don't want to keep others from talking, but I thought I would just point that
no,
out.
good
One other
points.
thing too, translations. I think you mentioned Exodus 12, verse 40, and um, in most translations, including I think the JPS, it says the years that Israel was in Egypt, were 430 years. Uh, and on that very day they came out. And if you look at the Hebrew, the King James, I think, as I recall, might have this better because it's more literal. It's not the years. If you say the years they are in Egypt, then you've got a real problem with the Abraham chronology and everything else, and it just kind of
Yeah,
messes things up. But as you know, the literal idea is the sojourning. This is literal. The sojourning of the people of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And that works out exactly back to the time of Abraham. Some put it at age 75, some at age 99. It doesn't really matter. But it's unfortunate that that translation is there, because then you talked about the 480 years and the date of 1446, or some say 7 or
yeah,
whatever. It's all pretty locked in if you don't mistranslate that verse. And then you have the
yeah,
time in Egypt is what, 215 years, I think, is usually what people do. And most Bible chronologers are agreed on that. And that usually means somebody that thinks the Bible is, reliable and, if not inspired, trustworthy. and that the
Yeah.
writer of Exodus at that point is not trying to claim that, Joseph went down to Egypt, or Jacob, rather, the father, 400 years from the Exodus, but more like
Right.
200. And I just wanted to point that out because every Bible you pick up, it just plainly says, hey, the time they spent in Egypt was 430 years. And you think, whoa, what? That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
Right.
So those are my two little linguistic notes there.
Hey, good points. No, good points. What
And
else
I'll
you
let
got,
you
Dr.
handle the
Tabor? What
name
else can
since
you help?
you're going to do the name next time, and I don't want to even get into that. But the
Yeah.
AA,
Yeah.
share AA, and all of that stuff. So that'll be
Right.
fun.
Yeah, these are good. These are good. We love going through the details
I'm going
of
to get
these
off the
texts.
stage because
All
I
right.
don't like,
Okay.
I don't want others to feel like, oh, these
Dr. Tabor's
so-called
here. Yeah.
experts are commenting, and therefore, what would I have to say? Because you all are
No.
experts
You're
in our view.
all right. All right. I'm going to invite Julia to the stage. Hello, Julia. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome. Welcome. I see you. Can I hear you? See if you can unmute your mic if it's not already. Okay. All right. So while we're waiting, I'll let Julia work on that. I will say, some of the points that we're covering, if you look at, there's quite a bit in this Torah reading. So I know some of you have good comments and questions. Julia, if you continue to try, I'm going to invite Dave to the stage, and I'll come back to you. So don't think I've forgotten about you. Hello, Dave. Welcome. Good to see you. Shabbat
Good
Shalom.
morning. Good morning. Yeah, there's a there's a lot of problems with the Exodus route that's generally accepted, even to the south, which David Roll believes is correct. Just looking at the geography and the trade routes of the time, and I think she's now Dr. Deborah Hearn from
That's right.
Australia, has an incredible paper on these routes. And whether Simca is right or Dr. Hearn is right about the exact locations, they're close to one another. And, we always get this, you know, uh, it has to fit someone's religion. And, um, you know, I, I don't want that. I want to know the truth.
Right.
And the issue at the end of the day is when you see things like the menorah that's inscribed on Har Karkum and other things that are inscribed, and remember the stones that were set up at the bottom for I believe they were sacrificing down there, and that was known as a mountain of God for a long time before Moses ever showed up. And so I feel very comfortable with it. We've been there twice. It's quite a long journey, as you know, and you have to get permission from the IDF to go there,
And an
and
escort. And
well,
an escort. Remember, we had to be
and an
escorted
escort.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, and the escort, and the issue is for us is that when you go there, um, I'm just going to put up one more picture. You get the idea of where you're really at. You'll see my picture. Uh, you get an escort with a freaking machine gun on the top, and if you don't set that up right, you'll never get there. I'm not saying I know for sure that that's where it is, but if I had to make a guess and put down my paycheck, I would guess Har Khartoum.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, she's a great she's got a lot of points. And so when you look at people also can only walk, a group of people sometimes as little as 6 to 9 miles a day. If you have, that's what the people today are walking with the huge refugees with huge amounts of
Right.
goods and stuff. And then you think if they did bring animals that had to walk, crippled uh, children you had to hold, I mean, say they got 10 miles a day. Um, it's one of the things that for us really limits the length. So Saudi Arabia is just absolutely absurd, as Dr. Tabor said already, the issue of, um, David Rolls, saying, "I'm sorry, but you're way off,"
Yeah.
is a thing. Unfortunately, our great trip to these places was canceled because of the war. But that we really, will go back there, and hopefully people will come to us. Another thing that I've been doing with some satellite technology is looking at elevations and all the other stuff. The second thing I would say is this, that if you look at uh, the ecology of the time, that's another thing that has changed so much. And you have to look at all those aspects when you go back, and you can take a scientific look and see this.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just wanted to say that, uh, it was really great talk today, and I don't want to take up everyone's time, but we've been there, and we know that Moses stopped an era voter were blossoming roses today. And you start kind of using that theory of constraints,
Yeah.
and there's only so far they could have gone where Kadesh Barnea is. And as you know, the other issue that's really a big deal is that people don't realize how long they stayed at Kadesh, or at Kadesh,
Yeah.
because what happens is they didn't wander for 40 years. Like, that's
That's
a
right.
understanding. They wandered for maybe 2 years or something like this, and
Yeah, you're
so all those
exactly
things
right. I
start adding
mean,
up.
yeah, Deuteronomy really kind of seals it up, at least if you read it closely. I think it has the passage where it says they were there for 38 years at Kadesh Barnea. So the wandering
Right,
period is not. But let me
right.
ask you, Dave, because you and I both have some good photos. If you have time over the weekend, if we could set up
Yeah,
in the dialogue here an entry
yeah,
that's about Har Kharkoum, and let's maybe
yes, sir.
between you and Patty and my
Yeah,
photos and videos, we could post some things up.
yes,
And I see James Tabor posted Deborah Hearn's article here, but we'll put all that in the dialogue, and then people can kind of go there and listen. Even though Dave and I are sort of matter of fact, well, it can't be Saudi Arabia. Don't be discouraged. Put your best discussions up. That, like some of you may say, no, I think it was in Saudi Arabia. So put those
yeah,
articles up, and we'll just have some good dialogue. That's what I want to do here.
yeah, yeah. I think that David Roll's crushing response, though, to this approach you know is powerful. We should put that up. And one last thing I wanted to put up, I'll put up there, is on the name. Patty wrote a really beautiful article and gave a talk in one of our. So I'm going to put that up. I don't want to, just read it if you can and comment. In the name of love, searching for the true name of the Creator. It's really, really
Yeah.
powerful. Kind of deeper thoughts as you get into this more. Again, she's taking her Shabbat nap, so I'm not going to wake her up to. But I would appreciate people reading that, and maybe this is a discussion we can have on the side at the annual meeting.
Yeah.
A lot of the greatest talks at the annual meeting are not given by the presenters.
That's right.
Nothing to. I'm not taking away anything from Dr. Tabor, or you, or me, or Ralph, or whoever's spoken. Those
Yeah.
are great talks, but sometimes the things that really bother people, they talk about around the campfire afterwards, so to speak. So I really
Absolutely.
encourage people to come. Yeah.
And
All
so
right. Well, listen.
let me do one other thing, Dave, before you go. Just
Sure.
I just wanted you. I know you'll hear me whether you're on stage or not, but put all of these things also in the dialogue so no one misses it. Not only this, but let's post again Patty's video.
Yeah.
Her song, and really one of the things that I want to do is get that stuff in front of people. We're currently redoing. It's going to take a little time, but we're redoing the United Israel World Union website, where it's going to be more reflective of the organization. I've got other things where I'm putting my things, Ross K. Nichols TV and so forth, But I want to
Right.
put all of that stuff, the lectures, front and center that you guys have done, and let's make
Yeah.
it more
Yeah.
reflecting UI. But here on Horeb, we want to put all of these good articles and videos and maps and
Yeah.
things of that
Yeah.
nature.
I would love to do that. The thing is, yeah, I don't want to say it in a way that sounds arrogant, but like, I've forgotten more than most people have learned about the Bible in their lifetime.
Yeah, that sounds
And
pretty
I
arrogant,
know
but I got you.
it does, but after 40 years of doing this, and there's a lot of new people,
Yeah,
and they all have good ideas. I've been listening to things where I personally have learned so much from other folks that
yeah,
talk, and also, to be quite honest, you can take Dr. Tabor or you or me or Patty or any of the other people that have spoken over the years at United Israel, and our views have changed based
that's
on new
true.
findings. And we don't have some chiseled in stone, this is what we believe, because it is a constant process of learning and moving upwards. And I always like to say, what you learn today, you would not have understood yesterday, and
Yeah,
what you learn tomorrow, you wouldn't have understood today. And I think that's it. You really have to just take that. Uh, uh, you know, i i you've got to take that step and not be afraid to lose some of the things that you thought you knew in such detail. And
yeah,
it's kind of hard for people to let go.
it is.
It's like the ground. If you've ever been in an earthquake, I lived in California, and the first earthquake I ever heard was, or ever felt, was, I was standing on a cement floor, and it felt like rubber, and it blew my mind. It's
Yeah,
like, how can this possibly be happening?
right.
But the issue is that God will reveal to, those who search will find, and it's not going to be tomorrow. It's going to be, for me, a lifelong journey, and I'll die not knowing everything. I've come to agree with that,
Yeah,
and that's why I like to go back, and I'll just hit David Horowitz, the Decalogue faith. Man, if you got the Decalogue faith happening, you got most of what the Almighty ever wanted out of you, and that's living the Decalogue faith, not just going through the motions.
yeah,
And so those are issues after all these years that I've learned, is that, how do you really treat people? How do you really think? How do you really help people? How do you really, and it's not just, well, I followed all the 13, I followed these 500 rules that I'm going to be saved. I don't think
right.
it's like that at all. I think it's a process, and how did you improve as a person, and it's your problem individually. It's not what my mom did wrong, or my schools taught me. It's me at the end. It has to accept the truth. And so I think that's what's great about this group and these talks afterwards, Ross. Again, I've spoken way too much, but I will tell you this. Please come to the annual meeting. It's a great talk, and no one believes exactly the same. That's the thing. We all have our different beliefs, and we have a core which David Horowitz set up, and we talk about it. And
Yeah,
UIWU is a learning institution. It's not a religion. So, anyways,
yep,
thank you, James Tabor, for finding it. His story of how he found United Israel World Union is really a great talk
yep.
there. So, anyways, Shabbat Shalom to y'all, and thanks for having me up there, Ross.
Hey, Dave, I'm going to get you off the stage, but if you have a chance, post the link to the conference registration page when you get off, and if you don't mind, just so
I
people
will.
have it. Can you
I'll do
do
that
that?
right now. I'll do it right
Thank,
now, brother.
thanks,
Yeah.
brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right. I'm going to invite Julia back up. Let's see if we've got this fixed now. All right, Julia, are we ready? I'm crossing my fingers. I hope that you can figure it out. Seth does have some Q&A, kind of a frequently asked questions and help guides, and I know he put those together. So if you can maybe follow that, I think he sent the link or tagged you. So try that. And look, one point while she's trying to get that to work, I think Seth brought it up, but others have said the same. If after one of these classes, a lot of topics are brought up, the name of the Hebrew midwives. There's a debate: are they Egyptian? Are they Hebrew? We've got the location of Sinai, Horeb. We've got all of these different things, a variation. Many topics come up. What we really want Horeb, this Discord server, the dialogue to be, is a place to really discuss this. And I just want to underscore, you've heard me and maybe James and David, all three have said that our view is that, Saudi Arabia is not the location in our view for Horeb. But again, we want people to discuss these things. So that's like, to David's point, we're not saying if you don't agree with us, you've got to go. No, we want you to present your best case, and then we'll present the evidence that caused us to come to our conclusion. Julia, one more time. Let me see. Can I hear you? All right. You keep trying. Betty, I'm going to invite Betty to the stage. Good morning, Betty. Let's see if your microphone is working today. Worked good the last couple of weeks. Hey, look at that. Perfect. Hey, how are you, Betty?
Yes, good. And I even got an ulcer of me up about that. No, Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat
Ross,
Shalom.
and thank you again for today's class. I love this whole story. Just to piggyback a little bit, James said is that the Koran translation in Exodus 12:40 does use sojourning, and I thought that was interesting. I looked up a couple of other translations, and they don't. They say years, but the Quran used that correctly in Exodus 12:40. I also thought it was interesting, and I hadn't really thought of it before, is when you were reading, and this happens quite a bit when I see new things, is that the people did not recognize Moshe as a Hebrew. They called him an Egyptian. And that's the same with our deliverer in Genesis. That was Joseph.
Yep.
So what would you say about that? What can we learn about that? That things don't always come to us from people we might identify with as one of us. I mean,
right.
I truly believe that we can learn from all people, and that we need not close our eyes. Moshe was a remarkable person in many ways. Not only was he compassionate, which is one of the attributes of him, but he also was observant. And if you think you're on a walk and you see something spectacular, and are you afraid? Did you just keep walking, or do you turn aside and take a look and investigate? And I just think that's really important to keep our eyes and ears open, because there are things all around us and within other people and within us to help us to learn and to improve who we are.
Yeah.
And draw us closer to the Father. There's also, I thought it was interesting too, the connection that you made about water. I think you made it, or maybe I was just thinking it in my mind. Yes, you did, with Moshe and the ark and the water. I mean, Noah and the water, and then Moshe being drawn out of the water. And in the beginning, in Bereshit, it talks about the earth being covered with water, and there was darkness on the face of the deep. And then we read in Ezekiel.
Hello.
One second, Betty. 1 second, Betty. We do hear you,
something in the
Julia.
background.
Yep, that's just Julia doing a mic test. So we'll get you on in just a moment, Julia. Good, it's working.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll mute. Okay.
No, it's good. We hear you.
No, I'm almost done, Julia. I know sometimes I can be long-winded, but I'll be shorter today.
No, you're okay.
With the water, in Ezekiel, it talks about that the water is going to come up from the throne, and go out throughout the world and clean up the world, like a big mikvah. And everything in the Dead Sea will become, and then we'll all have new life. And I love the idea of the water, and I think it has just a special energy, and um, it has life. Our
Yep.
bodies are what, 90 something percent water. And so I don't know, there's just so much in Torah that we can anyway, that's really that's all for now.
Well, very good. I tell you one thing, that some of the comments that you made, one of the points you started with, this idea that both Moses and Joseph are thought to be Egyptian, and Dave Tyler commented during the class today that there is quite a bit in the Hebrew Bible connecting Israel's origins, if you will, to this tradition that they spent time in Egypt. I mean, it's a major part of the story, right? And so we would expect to see that. What we also see is the family connections. Moses is married to someone outside of his people. He's married to Midianite. We'll talk more about Midianite either later today, if we have an opportunity, or in another class, because as I recall, not this next one, but maybe the next class is really all about the mystery of Midian. But when you think about Egypt, Joseph, his wife, remember we talked about this, his wife is an Egyptian,
Hmm.
not only an Egyptian, she is the daughter of a priest, an Egyptian priest. So there is this really, Israel is wedded to Egypt, and I think most scholars have shown fairly convincingly that there is an Egyptian element, particularly in the priestly materials, that comes out pretty strong. So, but good
Right.
points, Betty.
The
And
only you brought up something else. Can I just say just one more thing? And
yeah,
then that is well, guess what? I just forgot, because I saw that Dave Tyler and my brother both posted that my book is coming out soon, and now I'm all flustered and I can't think of what I wanted to
that's
say.
okay.
But
That's a
my book is coming out soon, and it's been an endeavor of love, dedicated to my late husband, Roger.
yep.
So I'll think of the other thing, hopefully. If not,
Cool.
it'll be okay.
If you do, raise your
Thank
hand,
you.
and we'll definitely have you give us a little bit more information as the book publication comes about, and whatever day it comes out. When we're together on that weekend, we'll let everybody know and post the link. So, all right,
All
good
right.
deal.
Well, thank you. Thank you
All
so
right,
much. And thanks for your help.
hey, no problem. Thank you very much. I'm gonna now, Julia, all you have to do is unmute. You have fixed your
Can you
audio.
hear
Let's see.
me?
Absolutely,
Oh,
we can hear you.
wonderful. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make it feel like I was rushing Betty. I didn't know you
No,
all
no,
were
no,
going to
that's
hear me
fine.
when I was doing my tests. Um, I like what she was talking about and what you all were talking about, because it just brings to mind that in the Bible he says mixed multitude. He puts
Yeah,
it in because it's that that it
yep,
wasn't just coming straight down through that lineage. And so I think it's a wonderful thing. The other thing that I really liked is that when I was rereading this also yesterday, it hit me when it was just the two midwives that were mentioned, and I said, wait a minute, it talks about how numerous they were. It couldn't have just been two, but
right,
the fact that it brings about that because they feared God. And it lets you know that even if they weren't all Hebrew midwives, that they still understood and feared God. And, uh, when you're watching childbirth, I think that's one of the things that you really realize, and it's hard to not to think that there is someone, even
Yeah,
if they wouldn't acknowledge that it was God, that it was someone that childbirth is just this miracle that happens. And so the fact that you brought that up, but it still says that they feared God, and it was like it wasn't just the Hebrew midwives, and I
right.
just thought that was interesting. Yeah,
Let me add
and
one thing. Go no, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say too, when I was listening to Dr. Tabor, and he talked about the 430 years, and I'm like, yeah, if that does include sojournings all the way back to Abraham, it's it's when he told Abraham what he was gonna do that the clock started counting. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
One thing I
interesting.
was going to add when you mentioned about the midwives, the thing that I love about this story from a spiritual standpoint is that the midwives who feared God preserved the life of these babies,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
their names were remembered even to this day. Today, think about this.
Yeah.
Let's say
Yeah.
that these events took place 1500 BCE. Let's say, just for the math, that means that about 3,500 years from the events, we still
Mm,
remember these women who saved the
yeah.
lives of babies, and we don't
Yeah.
even know who the Pharaoh was. Now, at
Right.
that time, that Pharaoh was big stuff. Everybody knew him then. But
Yeah.
today, he's lost in the sands of time.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
Your
yep,
class was so beautiful because when you bring about the fact that the name of it is names, and then there's so many things that we don't know the name of, it's just, yeah,
yep.
God is wonderful. That's
I,
all I want to say.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I love whenever you get a clue. These are the names, and then you have gaps in the names. And we're going to get, I think it's interesting because the writer is such a wonderful storyteller. This is why I spent my life to this point and hope another 60 years or so delving into these texts, is because the artistry that's there. You go, what's the name of this? What's the name of this book? We're going to call it Names. What's the name of the child? Well, we don't really know. What's the name of the it and it then it builds in anticipation, and then we slowly throughout the book of names we get these names. Next week we're going to
Yes.
talk about the name of the God, and I think it's going to be quite revelatory. I cannot wait for next week's class. Hey, good comments, Julia. Anything else you wanted to add while you have the stage and your mic is working
Nope.
wonderfully?
That was it. That was it.
Hey, thank you very much. Have a wonderful
All
Sabbath.
right.
And
Thank
let
you.
me see. All right. So I have Betty is back. Betty, how are you?
I'm good. This is not what I was going to say before, but has to do with what Julia said and you with regarding the names of the midwives. I just read that some of you may know Rabbi Goldstein and his wife Leah, who live in Israel, and they just had a new baby, and the midwife was Shifra, and I thought that was very interesting. And Leah wrote a little something on Facebook about how our our world is made up of life and death. She has two sons. They have two sons in Gaza fighting, and in the midst of all of that, of the war, they have a new birth, a new baby in their family. And I
Yeah,
just thought that was a beautiful thought. And the midwife was Shifra. So
yeah.
I like that, and I wanted to share it. That's really all.
Wonderful. No, that's beautiful. Um, yeah, I was going to point out while you were talking, David posted a couple of charts, and I see a new chronology table. I recently read, I'm looking for it. Dave Tyler is the one who alerted me to the works of David Roll. I had not read his works. And so one of the things that I did in the last few years, probably right around the time I went through this Torah portion cycle, sometime around 2019 or maybe somewhere in there, I read David Roll's book on the Exodus. I'll get the title. I don't have it. I can't reach it from here, but I'll post that in the dialogue. And it was really, really good. Now, some things, it's like with anything else. It's like as you listen to me, there will be things you agree with, things you don't agree with. Just like, we all should really do our due diligence and research to make sure that we're right. And we don't just trust people's word. Do your own research. But anyway, I like Roll's stuff when he's in Egypt. I think he's among the best. So, for instance, one of the things that he puts out and I saw James was mentioning some of these texts earlier. Migdal is one of the locations that's mentioned at the crossing point at the water. In other words, when the children of Israel crossed the water, it's Migdal. And that place name. Now, that place name is mentioned several times in Scripture, and it is always in Egypt and never anywhere else. It is an Egyptian place. So if we know where Egypt was in the time of the Exodus, then we have to put the crossing of the sea on the edge of Egyptian land. And there is no Migdal at the Gulf of Aqaba. So anyway. All right, Betty, I didn't mean for you to just have to be on the stage with me while I pontificated on that, but it was something that
Oh,
hit me.
I don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm
All right.
finished. Thank you, Russ.
Okay. Have a beautiful day. Thank you for that. What else? Who else has? Let's see. Okay, so this is Dave just posted Pharaohs and Kings: A Biblical Quest, and what I'll do. I know some of you are not on the Discord, so we'll look for a way to share those pieces also where you can get them, because there are some pretty good pieces of information that we have here. Exodus, there it is. That's the one, David. That's the one I read. Exodus, myth or history. That's the one. And then I went back later and read Pharaohs and Kings: A Biblical Quest. So, in my view, David Roll is super when he's in Egypt. But then as he leaves Egypt to study the Exodus route, I don't accept his view of that. But that's just my view. So, just for your information, though, I think that it's important if we develop these discussion points in the dialogue, everyone can contribute. Seth has it set up pretty simple so that you can go in and you can pick a tag, whether it's archaeology or something like that. We might even set one up on, the Exodus. And that way we'll call it the Exodus, a tag. And that way all of this information can go under that and people can really do some research. It is one of the, as you know, the central points in all of biblical writing. Everything goes back to that Exodus and Horeb. So I think it would be great. And then we could post these various articles and links, and that way everyone can debate and discuss. I think it'd be good. Okay, who else? It is a little after 1 now. We've been going for about 45 minutes, but I still have a few. If some of you want to raise your hand, put your questions or comments out there. In the meantime, I'll bring up a couple of the controversial things that I said in this class, one of which, maybe some of you have an opinion, you want to shoot this down if you'd like. One of the things that I brought up is that in Exodus chapter 3, verse 10, if I recall, Moses says that he is slow of tongue. Is it 3 or 4? Exodus. He says, I'm in English, slow of tongue. The only other place in Scripture that's used is in Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. And there, the meaning is given that it indicates an unfamiliarity with a language, an inability to speak another language. So I propose, this is kind of controversial, but I propose that it could mean that Moses could not speak the language of the group he is addressing. And then that brings up all sorts of other questions. I think we tend to imagine that the ancient Israelites, when Joseph goes into Egypt, that they built them a synagogue and they met every Shabbat and they kept the holy days and they wore tzitzit and the men had the curls, the long sideburns and kippot, and none of that's true. None of that's biblical. So, did the children of Israel? I guess the question is, does the Bible support that the children of Israel were following some ancient patriarchal faith and speaking Hebrew to one another, or did they ultimately become Egyptians? They're there for hundreds of years. People can debate exactly. Is it 200 and some odd? Is it 400 years? But I think in the class, if I recall, I used the analogy of America. I know some of you aren't American. But in America, many American citizens can trace their genealogy, their origins, their family origins to the Middle East, to Africa, to what is now Europe. But do we still speak those native languages that our ancestors spoke? And are we, in essence, have we become a different group? So I see East Alabama says Moses spoke Egyptian, ? Certainly that would have been a language that Moses spoke, and probably, and this is my guess based on the text, he would be more familiar, more fluent in Egyptian than anything else. So we have to think about that. Now, I'll get into this and develop this idea more over the next several classes, but my point is let's read the story and allow the story to really sink in, because I think that's where it really becomes important. It's in the details that we have the best questions, and often that drives us to the best answers. Okay, I see Nikita. I am inviting Nikita to the stage. How are you today? Shabbat Shalom, Nikita. And I'll let you, there you go. I see you
Shabbat Shalom. How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully. How are you?
Great, absolutely great. Trying not to take up too much time, but I have a million questions. I won't ask them all, of course, but I wanted your thoughts on the I wanted your thoughts on the significance of at the beginning of the Moses story, Moshe's story, when it says that Yocheved hid him.
Yep.
It doesn't include the husband. It says she.
Yep. Well, it could
has
be.
Has that ever been?
It could be as simple as.
I'm sorry, Walt. I don't mean to interrupt you, but the question you just asked, the question that you just asked about what faith were the Israelites believing in at that time? One of I forget who taught the lesson, but I did hear a lesson once about how they had been there so long, and most people gauge their blessedness or who their God is by how prosperous they may be. This person must really be blessed. God's really blessed them because they see these material items.
Yeah.
And so when they came with their father to the land of Egypt and they saw how good Joseph was doing, as opposed to how they were doing, I don't know who served who at that time. They were like, well, we want to be like you because, look at what you have. Look at all this opulence. So we might want to, marry a woman that's a daughter of the high priest of On, that type of thing. And that's one, I love the Most High so much. That's one thing I love so much about him among so many things, is that he proves himself, not that he has to, but for our own reassurance. You may get a glimmer, a little crumb of something. And then he's like, if you keep following these crumbs, you will get to who I am. You will get to the creator. So when he says well, who shall I tell them sent me? And he's like, I'm the creator. I can be who I want to be. I can be everything you need. I can create what you don't have in the moment that you need it. It's not something that I have to work for. I got to find resources for. I will be who I will be. What do you need? How can all that? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll go forever. But yeah, I wanted to ask you that about the significance between Yoshebed and not her and her husband hiding, because in the it showed that some of the Hebrews willingly gave up their children. I can't remember the source. Forgive me.
Yeah,
It might have
it's
been one of the. Go ahead.
no. I was just going to say it's a great question. It could be as simple as in many homes even today. My wife does tons and tons and tons, and she frankly doesn't have time to keep me up on all the details. I mean, she might have been just the person who said, I maybe she was the one who took that baby and said, "Not my baby. We are not going to kill. I'm going to do this." And he's not mentioned, as you say, early on, and later we get his name, but we don't even know his name at this point. In fact, we don't know the parents until the next week's Torah portion. But yeah, it is interesting, and I don't know, since we're not told. We just have to maybe give a good thumbs up to Yocheved's hard work and forethought there. One thing I was going to add, though, about your other points that you were making, I don't know that Joseph. Now, Joseph does give credit to God generically, uses Elohim for interpreting the dreams and so forth. But by the time he gets to the place in Egypt where he is exalted to the second position, he's participating in divination. And I think that we shouldn't ignore that. And we tend to want to say, "Nuh-uh, not my biblical heroes wouldn't." Solomon was all great in wisdom and no one was wiser. And yet Solomon was worshiping other gods and building temples to those gods. So, it's the Bible doesn't cover that up. I think it's interesting. I guess you thought of that as well.
Yes,
You
yes.
know,
Because it just lends. You never know what another person gives credit to. I do believe at some point that when he got back with his father, especially when you think of how he named his son, he's like, "I've forgotten all of my father's house."
yeah,
That may be a part of it, not just the familiar relationships, but also the connection with the Most High. Because all this time he's praying to the Most High, he's in the pit and he's in prison, and
yep,
he's being mistreated. And now this foreign, and to that Pharaoh's credit, whoever he may have been, he said that your God's got to be the great one.
yeah,
And you would think at that time, since the Most High saved Egypt from the famine, there it is again. The Most High has always proven himself to us.
yeah,
When he did that, that gave the Egyptians the opportunity to get to know who he is.
mm-hmm,
Back then with the Joseph, because their gods that they currently prayed to was not giving them any kind of insight as to what the future was going to bring.
yeah,
But here comes this foreign god of a slave on top of that, telling him this is what's going to happen.
yeah.
So you would think it would have been some type of turning around for the Egyptians to come and have an opportunity to worship the true God, the creator, but that didn't materialize because Joseph is on the other side. He said, "Yeah, I'm worshiping him, but yeah, look where I am."
Yeah, I've had plenty of times where I've thought, I wonder if I can almost see Asenat saying, "Honey, please, let's just go to my church because, my dad's a priest there." And that temptation, it's pretty strong if you think about it. He is married into a very, very big deal. I mean, if you look at ancient Near Eastern studies and you look at the name Nyet, the Egyptian god Nyet, and how that religion was practiced, it's hard to imagine that Joseph would have not participated in some of that But at the same time, he's struggling. He's struggling to maybe, as you say, regain the faith of his fathers. But I often think about when the children of Israel are in Egypt, how well did they keep that patriarchal faith, and what was that patriarchal faith? I think that a lot of times we assume that it looked a whole lot like orthodoxy today in the Jewish community. In fact, one person once critiquing me wrote on Facebook, and usually it doesn't, it just rolls off my back, but they were warning people of listening to me teach the Torah, because they said the only person you should listen to expound on the Torah is a Jew who lives in Israel. And so I privately wrote this person, and I said, that's fascinating, because the Torah wasn't even written in Israel, at least according to the biblical narrative. So anyway, but those things are good to entertain, and I always appreciate your questions. And I think we don't know exactly why it's only the mother at this point that is involved in saving the child. But, there's something about a mother and the children. She may have just kept him in the loop and said, honey, we're going to do plausible deniability. They're talking about killing all the babies, and I'm going to take care of this, and you don't have to worry. And she enlists her daughter. We later learn her name is Miriam, and they guide this child. Now, a bigger question for me that arises from this narrative is, how is it? Think about the power in all this. Providentially, the daughter, and then Pharaoh's daughter says, hey, it's an Israelite baby, and she's like, well, how would you like me to, can I go get one of the Hebrew women? Anyway, it's really an incredible story, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And one more point, that may
All
have
right.
been why Jacob wanted to raise Joseph's sons,
That's a
because
good point.
of you remember at the end of Genesis, he was like, I'm going to take your sons onto me, because you may be a little too far gone to bring
Yeah.
back right now. So at least
Maybe
I
so.
know the next generation will have it.
Yeah, maybe so. It's a good point. Very good point. Hey, as always, Nikita, I appreciate your comments and insights. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you for class. Loved it.
Hey, I appreciate it. Have a wonderful week. I am going to invite Karen. Hey, Karen, how are you today? Shabbat Shalom. I see your mic is muted.
How about now?
I see it. I see it's off now, and I can hear you. How are you?
Okay, good. So today in this Joseph saga, and all living in two different worlds kind of thing, I'm remembering the story of Naaman. And in my situation, I kind of see myself as similar, where I have to sometimes be involved in things I wouldn't normally be involved in.
Yep.
And, Naaman asks Elijah, when I go into the temple with my master, can I be forgiven? And Elijah says, go in peace.
Yep.
And I see, Joseph kind of living in two different worlds, and Moses living in two different worlds. But, their hearts are in the right place, even though they may be in the house of Pharaoh. Their hearts and their minds are somewhere else. They're where they're supposed to be. And I think that God gives consideration to that.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up. I want to say great minds think alike. I think the same way, and I've used that very same text. It's 2 Kings chapter 5. And I encourage people to look that up. I know people who have cut off family members because they don't believe the same. I know people that have done that. I am not going to do that. So I know that different people have to make that decision on their own. But for the very same text that you use, I have used that as well, and I think it's quite powerful. It's if people missed your point, just to underline it, I would restate it and just say, go read 2 Kings 5. He clearly says, look, my job, I have to go into this temple, and when I do, what am I supposed to do? And the prophet of Jehovah tells him, go in peace. So excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, in the beginning, I started cutting people off,
Yep.
but then I had a dream where I was told, shut your mouth,
Yeah.
don't speak.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then I stopped doing that. And I now, 7 years, down the road or whatever it is, I'm so glad that I shut my mouth and I didn't cut people off.
Yep.
Because, I can't, I was able to preserve relationships that I think are going to be important in the future. If you burn bridges, then that person can't come to you.
Yeah.
Or they won't.
That's right.
And I'm a believer in not burning bridges.
Yeah.
So, I see that, that with Joseph and Moses and, with Naaman, we're all kind of some of us are in a similar situation. So I just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, and I think there is a line. I think, the writer wants us to know that Joseph participates in divination, whatever that is. As I recall, the Hebrew word is tied to the same word nakash, which is it's translated. It can mean the same consonants can refer to a serpent. It can refer to enchanting. It can refer even to something shiny like brass, or later in time it would be bronze, but copper, I guess you could say, but any non-alloyed copper. But so the idea is that he's participating in something that's not kosher, we would say, and then of course Solomon takes it way, way too far. He's building, temples for these other women who are dedicated to other gods. Now, one thing that I'll say, and this gets me in trouble, but I'm at the place in my walk that it doesn't scare me anymore. But whenever we read the description, even of the temple in Jerusalem, it has heavy, heavy influences that are not kosher. I mean, things exist in the temple that are clearly influenced by Tyre. And, I think a lot of people put a lot of focus on the temple, and perhaps they shouldn't, Anyway. What else, Karen? What other great insights do you have for us today?
No, that's it. I really enjoyed this teaching. My girls and I are studying Exodus right now, so
great.
They're going to get to watch these too.
Hey, good. And keep us in the loop if you make great discoveries. I'm sure you ladies will.
Okay.
Post them. Let us know what you're finding.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay. I am going to Betty, I see you. Let me bring Miriam up. Let's see if Miriam is ready to go, and then I'll get you next, if that's okay. Miriam, if you unmute your mic, we're going to hope and pray that everything works wonderfully today.
Shalom.
Try. I hear you.
Okay, finally.
I
Am
hear
I
you.
loud enough?
Yep, there you go. I can hear you now. How are you today?
Pray. I am today. I mean, it just hits home, and it's back memories from past
Get Seth is saying get a little closer to the microphone, Miriam. Try to get a little closer to your microphone. All right, try it again. Just try to speak a little louder. Let's try it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
That sounds a little bit better. Just do what you're doing there and keep that up.
Okay. Um, lost my train of thought, but I really greatest Wehrman said to quiet and listen more. And
Mhm.
there's a reason why we were born with 2 ears and one.
That's a good point.
And you excellent. And um spoke about, being it started one way and then it was similar to I and really never had close what lost parents. Had family was at, at a young being more independent.
Miriam, I tell you, I want to hear what you have to say, but it's still breaking up too much. But maybe if you can type it, because I don't want to miss any of the wisdom that you have there. But it's too choppy. Wait, let me see. Try it now, Miriam. Let's see if we can pick up where you were. Let's try it again.
Okay, you hear me?
I heard you say that.
Okay, okay, you can now.
That sounds okay. Let's try one more time.
I'm lost, but I'll try to kind of reiterate what Karen said.
Yeah.
Now we should listen more.
All right, Miriam, I'm sorry. I am so sorry.
Having
It's
a
not.
relation.
Yeah. Hang tight right there, Miriam. I'm gonna. Yeah. It's just too broken. I don't know what's going on, but that's okay. We're gonna keep working, and Seth has some ideas. We might do a little phone call with you,
Have
Miriam. All right.
uh,
I'm gonna.
uh, we own instead of this one. I'll change. But
All right.
okay.
Sorry, Miriam. All right. I'm gonna bring. What's that? Okay. Let me bring Betty. Betty, let's see how you doing, Betty? You back? What kind of thoughts you have?
Yes, I'm back again the fourth time. I shouldn't apologize, but I
No,
kind
no, no, no.
of okay. No, first I noticed that Libby had said something in the chat, and I wanted to thank her for that. You know,
Okay.
Libby's mom, from my understanding, was one of the early forerunners of UIW. Um, and, you know, she was friends of David Horowitz. And I think what she taught her children was remarkable. Let's see if I can read it. She says, Mother always taught relationship is key to God's heart, and we must do all we can to preserve in order to reflect Jehovah at the right times. And is not that the the whole dictate, a purpose, everything behind UIW is to spread this love of God and to try to give compassion to other people and in everything that we do and live and say. In the words of I know Paul quoted it. It was not his original quote, but in him we can move and have our being. And I think that's what we need to do, is be men and women after God's own heart.
Yeah.
And in my own family, I go to different things they have at their house, dinners and everything, and they, my daughter doesn't pray in Jesus' name because she knows that I don't pray like that, but her husband does.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stop going to family dinners. I am just going to breathe silently. Hashem, they just don't know you yet. Just like I didn't know him all my life. I didn't, about it was on my 50th. Well, I'm not going to close myself off from my family and my friends and people that I love.
Yeah.
I think that just like Hashem says, he's the God of Kov Itzkak. Not that he's different, but that he reveals himself to each person in a way that they can understand. And who are we to judge?
Yeah.
I mean, look how long it took some of us.
Oh yeah, and
I love, you know, what Karen and pointed out the passage about Naaman.
Yeah.
I just think that we need to be more understanding, more compassionate, and look to the heart. And anyway, that's.
Yep, good points. Excellent points. All right, we have Betty. Can I get Nikita's comments? And I'm looking at it's. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to tell you, Nikita, what a wonderful conversation we had. I know you know that, but I really enjoyed talking to you. And it was through UIW, this wonderful organization, that I met you. And I hope you get to come to the conference, as well as all of you. I love all of you and really hope to see you face to face. And that's from my heart.
I do too. It's going to be fun. Yeah, if you can sign up, we're gonna have a great time. All right, Nikita. Welcome, Nikita. Did I get you on the stage? I think I did. Let me try that again. All right, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Sister Elisheva has been so gracious to me. I love her heart, and just speaking to her made her feel like I found a relative. So I'd love to see you there. But my question is, this is one of the reasons I wanted to get back to thank her, Julia B, and some of the other people that spoke in the chat. They reminded me that Joseph did want his body to go back to the land of his fathers. And it made me actually kick in a thought that a lot of Joseph's life after he was taken out of the pit was how he could act and accommodate the situation that he was in. So when he was at Potiphar's house, he had to put on a mask, so to speak. And then when he became the second to Pharaoh, he had to put on a mask, so to speak. But it was, and their point also triggered that he said, take my bones, not my family bones. Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure, being the high priest, the husband of the daughter of the high priest, they had a burial plot.
Yeah.
So make sure you take my bones, and don't take it, just get me out of here.
Yeah.
And then another point to that was that may be why his brothers were so terrified after their father passed, because they saw the mask that Joseph had as opposed to who he really was.
Yeah.
And it could be their own guilt playing into that also. But I just wanted to correct that. I never want any information that comes out of my mouth that's maligning Joseph or anything to that nature. That was not my intent, just a thought working in my head. So thank you all for the correction. I really appreciate it.
Hey, good points. Yeah, and that's the thing. Thanks a lot, Nikita. I'm going to move you to the audience, and we'll try one more time with Miriam in just a moment. You know, the thing about this is a safe place to entertain questions that a lot of other groups would not entertain. At least that's what I would like it to be. You know, there have been countless generations and hundreds, if not thousands of years where inquisitors have forced obedience and adherence to a set of doctrinal beliefs and so forth. So if we want to question the veracity of a text or entertain this or that idea about the biblical text, you can do it here. You know, so for instance, I say things a lot of times, and I know that it might be a little bit on the edge for some, but it's never intended to undermine or ridicule or in any way cause someone to lose their faith. But when I approach a question about a text, I want to really pull that thing apart. And so if Joseph, according to the text, says, one of you boys stole my cup that I used for divination, I want in my mind to say, well, what is divination? And if Joseph was participating in that, you know, it opens up all these other questions. You know, what was he somehow praying the Amidah, you know, in his bedroom? I don't believe so. So it's okay to have those questions. At least here it is. So just wanted to clarify that. Now, if any of you are able, bring some of these conversations, particularly, obviously, the group that are members of Horeb. Let's put some of these discussions here, you know, that we've talked about. Let's talk about the debate over where the location of Horeb is. You know, all that stuff is fun and exciting. And bring those things into the debate. Let's have friendly discussions and weigh that. Any other questions before we go? If not, I would like to encourage you to join Jono and I on Wednesday nights. If you're part of the Yakad, you can either join here on Horeb, you can join any of the layers there. You can do the same on our YouTube channel. You can do the same on Patreon. But any of that puts you in our group where you can be part of our audience while we do these shows on Wednesday. If you're not part of that, they'll be aired later, so that's fine. You're not going to miss it. You just get kind of an early participative role in things. But this is going to be really fun. We are going to get more and more and more into the Shapira saga, and I really encourage you to join. Things are really opening up in that study. It's getting really fun. So those are Wednesday night, and hopefully you'll join us. Now, the other thing, if you missed it, Seth and I have worked together to get audio versions of everything that we're doing. You should have received an email. If you didn't, you can sign up for that on rossknichols.com. You can sign up on United Israel, worldunion.com for our newsletter. And if you sign up for that, you'll get all of these links. But we're now on Spotify. We're now on Apple Podcast. And we've got several different shows. So if you're just interested in listening to the Saturday shows, you can go and find those on our channel. You can also listen to the ones for Jono and I. So stay tuned. There is much more coming down the pipe, as we say. And I hope that all of you have a beautiful week. Until Wednesday, that's it from me. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. Have a beautiful, beautiful week wherever you are. I look forward to seeing you next time.